Is there an extra microphone we could have up here at the table? Thank you. Because this impressive piece of machinery is not connected to anything, I don't think.
Unless you want to connect it.
Yeah, if you guys just give me 2 seconds, I'll have you guys all taken care of.
Okay.
Already all planned.
And I'm fine with this one. Here, and this is yours. I'll just use the hand. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody, to our closing presentation for this afternoon. I will ask if people could, we do feel like some of you are very far away, like almost in another state. If you'd like to come closer, we promise not to bite. Jonathan Reynoso is going to will have a microphone for your questions. We ask you that you use the microphone since this presentation is being recorded. So good afternoon. My name is Josie Yangos. I'm director at the Illinois Resource Center, and it's my pleasure here just to be. I'll be playing, just calling on people for their questions, and we have a wonderful panel here of bilingual directors here. To my left is Shadia Salem from North Palos School District 117. To her left is Amber Bogren from Harvard CUSD 50. And then to Amber's left is Tammy Peterson from Beardstown CUSD 15. And then finally, anchor is Guadalupe Ricconi from Urbana School District 116. And I think it's no coincidence that 3 out of the 4 people up here are also members of the Illinois Bilingual Advisory Council. So if you ever, and I'm sure, I'm not going to say it, but if you ever want to talk to them about policy and issues that you want the council to take up, then you should feel free to call upon any of us. So we will this is basically an opportunity for you to, I know you've all been going to one session and another, either these past 2.5 days, 2 days. And I really want to congratulate all of you for coming to this very last session on a Friday afternoon. But we want to know if there's any burning questions that you have. You have the expertise here of these wonderful bilingual education directors here, who will be glad to provide their opinions. And we also have a number of staff members from the Illinois State Board of Education here as well, who can also supplement some of that information as well. So, don't be shy. Okay, so, the lady in the gray.
Thank you. Hi there. So I'm a new bilingual director in a school where we have previously only had ESL programming. And we've had an influx of students from Ukraine, about 23 students from Ukraine, several more Spanish speakers. So basically, we qualify for bilingual programs in 3 languages now in a school of 800 students in a 1-school district. So my problem is how to staff, that's one of the issues, how to staff these 3 bilingual programs. And we're trying, and we have a para who speaks Ukrainian. We advertise for a Ukrainian EL or bilingual teacher, and of course, no bites there. And I'm wondering now, like, what's probably going to be able to be budgeted for next year would be a Spanish bilingual teacher. But in the high school, I'm really perplexed on how to structure the program to give all of our speakers, including our Urdu and our Arabic and our, all the speakers, the services they need with limited funding for staffing. So my real question is, how do you have any models for how to structure a bilingual program that is new and fledgling? Or resources that you could point me to?
Hello, can you hear me? I think just starting off with some of the languages, if they are low incident languages for ESL programming, one of the things we really try to encourage our teachers to do is go back for an ESL endorsement so that ESL does not become a place for the student, but is immersed within the core content of the classes. Now, for bilingual teachers, it is definitely a challenge statewide. We've gone the paraprofessional route where we'll work with the paras to go back to school or to receive the transitional bilingual education temporary licensure to be able to serve our students. Reaching out to families and parents and looking for community members who are interested in going through that pipeline. I think if you're really struggling to be able to, with the funding and the resources, hire more bilingual teachers, then maybe the resource model would be something to explore to be able to have students see these bilingual teachers and be supported within, throughout the school day for all core content areas. I'm not too familiar with that just because we do have co-teaching in our middle school and throughout our school district where we have bilingual teachers in the classrooms. So that's one thing I can think of.
I would probably concur in regard to the resource option. If you're talking about a high school level, maybe that's the lowest hanging fruit that you could work for in having those particular students be maybe clustered in a resource section, or if you still have study halls in your district, you can make certain that paraprofessional support or your bilingual support people are either facilitating those spaces or can be pushing into those spaces for additional support. Certainly, I would like to say as well, there's lots of professional development that could be had certainly through the IRC or lots of resources online that your content classroom teachers could be taking advantage of as well in terms of how to scaffold their content for those new students that are going to be joining their classes.
Hang on, we want to hear the question.
Sorry. I don't want to dominate the questioning here, but I know that those suggestions are wonderful and things that are thinking about too, but they don't put us in compliance for true bilingual programs.
Until you have certified teachers with the correct endorsements, you won't be.
So we do the best we can with what we have and continue to encourage and support them until you find the right teachers.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Dominating over here now. I have a really quick question. Well, maybe it's not that quick, but similarly, we have had bilingual programming in my district. I'm in Plainfield. I oversee pre-K 12. So we have, a large number of ELs in our district. My question though is, right now I don't have consistent programming across the middle schools and the high schools. So some high schools may do more of the push-in model, some do an ELD study hall, some do this, some do that. This is my first year. I want to start to have research support whatever model I'm going to move us forward with. Are there where do I start with like strong research? What's best for kids at the middle school and high school levels?
So, I'm not on. Hello?
You're on.
Oh, thank you. So for me, I'm in a similar situation right now, looking to make some changes and living in a college community. You can bet that that's the first thing I get asked for is a lot of research. I think in all of our fields, there are lots of experts that, we've read about in our own undergrad, graduate studies. But I feel like a good hub for research is always the Center of Applied Linguistics. If you go to their website, which I think is duallanguageschools.org, I believe, they have like a link just for research. So depending on what changes specifically you're looking at, I think as a director, when your buildings are consistent, that definitely helps, when you're looking at curriculum, when you're looking at assessments, because if everyone's doing something different, that really makes it challenging, not only from the curriculum perspective, but also from the assessment piece, because then, if you're using the same assessment, but you're using different ways to get there, your results aren't necessarily going to align.
Absolutely, and our children are the ones that move around a lot. So if they go from one middle school on one side of town to the other, their services look completely different. So, okay, thank you. I pulled that up already.
I think another interesting point is if you do have different models in different schools, and you have like 2 middle schools, it would be interesting to take a look at the data between the 2 schools, and if there is something that's trending in terms of what you're currently doing, that could be something to look into in terms of strengths of certain models and programming you have.
That's a good idea. Thanks. That makes sense. I gotta get my steps in.
This is a team effort.
So staffing is the same, like we're all dealing with that right now. And I was wondering if at the ISB level, if there's something that can be done about, like we have paraprofessionals that have gone through their teaching courses, work and everything, but they haven't been able to pass the language portion of the English. So if we have a 2-way dual language program, I was wondering if there's anything that could be done at the ISB level to, if they're not going to be instructing in English at all, could we give them that licensure so that they can be a classroom teacher in a 2-way dual language program?
I'll defer to ISB, and Lupa Riccone can correct me. This actually was a question that came up yesterday in the licensure presentation.
Yeah, that was
And
me.
I don't know, were you there?
That was me.
That was you? Oh, okay, good. I'm glad that at least my recall is not bad. So you're just asking the question again. Right. Okay, so we have additional ISB people here who, my understanding was that it's not like the answer was no, that the individual has to be proficient in both languages. I'm seeing Beth Robinson shake her head yes to that. That's where it stands right now. Right.
Yeah, I guess my question is there anything that can be done about that at the ISB level? Just because we could use those teachers for sure.
Yeah, I can't answer on behalf of ISB. What I was going to suggest, because I have had a similar issue with teachers that, you know, their degrees were in Spanish-speaking countries, so they're trying to take the target language proficiency, but in English. One thing that has helped some of them is that test you can actually ask for accommodations if you are for EL. So one of my teachers actually asked for the accommodation, which was primarily extended time, and that made a huge difference. So I agree with you. If they're only going to be teaching sections that are taught in Spanish, you know, what else can we do to get around that? But for the interim, that's a possibility too.
Thank you. I didn't know that. I appreciate it.
If you have a question,
So I have two questions. My first question is, what gifted tests do you use in your district to properly place our EL students into gifted programs? We're seeing, and it's fantastic, we're seeing a lot of our ELs are starting to qualify for gifted now, but the current test that we use is not done in their native language or is not, it's just not appropriate when we're thinking about sociocultural context. Is there a specific gifted test that you use in your district that you found to be helpful?
We do not have a gifted and talented program in our district.
We do not in Urbana either.
We do, but that is on my to-do list to look further into. And actually, I believe that's a topic of conversation that we just had in Yakbe this week.
Right, we were just, actually, we started having this conversation at our June meeting, and one of our council members, Samina Hadi Tabusan, was actually making the contention that when you're talking about English learners, you should actually be using a assessment that doesn't rely, a nonverbal assessment, right? So to be, if you're talking about something being fair and equitable. So, I mean, that's, and she of course told us how fraught with difficulty this whole topic is. But we we ourselves have been discussing about going and hearing from the gifted and talented advisory group and having some more direct conversation about this.
Fantastic. It's encouraging to know that it's being discussed. My second question was, in your experience, how have you gotten families who are reluctant to come to school? I'm thinking specifically with our bilingual parent advisory committees. We're having a very challenging time making a solid committee. We have parents coming in and out to meetings, which is fantastic, and we're so happy to have them there, but eventually we'd like to get the official BPAC board and everything established. How in the past have you gotten it so there's just a consistent group?
I utilize my parent liaison and do a lot of meetings ahead of that meeting to ensure, and that's kind of like the first step in, okay, this is what we're doing. I rely heavily on the parent liaison.
Similar to us, we have parent liaisons who really work amazing with the new families and are able to get to know them. And if they see that there's someone familiar there, then they're going to come. I think if you don't have parent liaisons, then it would be challenging to do this. So one thought would be to take a look at your bilingual teachers. And if the families are really comfortable with them, then if they're there, they're more reluctant to come.
I think an additional strategy could potentially be offering your BPAC meetings both in person and virtually, utilizing maybe Facebook Live or something, so people, although can't attend in person, can then be connected to the association online.
I think another piece as well is thinking about the location of your meetings. So, you know, I've utilized spaces that are like pavilions in a park that's within the, you know, where a large population of, you know, in specific case, my Latinx families might live, so.
Another thing that we found is we have to have a meeting in the morning and we have to have a meeting at night. If we only do the meetings at night, we miss a large group of parents.
The other piece that I would suggest is sometimes you have to, and this isn't going the traditional BPAC route, but I know this afternoon we had a presentation from the Parent Mentor Program that's just gotten a fairly large infusion of state dollars. And so that might be a way of, again, if you're trying to recruit, say, a parent liaison or other parent mentors, now that there's state funding to help support programs like that, maybe that's a way to get parents into the door to help work in classrooms, and they obviously get training and stipends in order to participate. I think you need to think of, I know many years ago at the IRC we had a program of offering adult DSL courses. And man, that's a way of getting lots of parents into the door. So sometimes it's a question of what are the other activities that can almost serve as recruitment pools for BPACs.
Just to put a plug in for adult ESL courses, Governor State University is amazing to work with for this. So we'll be having them partner with our families in providing adult ESL courses. So if you want to look into them, they're great.
This might be for Josie, but what is the procedure for becoming like a host school for the EL endorsements? And costs involved in doing that?
So the IRC does partner with National Louis University for the endorsement courses, and there probably is no finer, in my mind, no finer professional development activity than to have teachers get the ESL or bilingual endorsement. We can talk offline, but we do have a minimum requirement of teachers that need to participate in the courses. And our courses are relatively economical. They're $670 per course, so it adds up to about $4,000 over the course of those 6 courses. But I'd be happy to have another conversation with you about that.
Okay, this might be a really bad question considering everything that's going
There
on.
are no bad questions.
Well, kind of. So when we have, obviously there's staff shortages everywhere, but if we have a staff member who's going on a leave or who's going, who has to be out for several weeks, absence, what is the legal requirement in terms of subbing for that person? Like, do they have to have an EL endorsement or an ESL endorsement, or?
That's a good question.
No? Okay. I'm just double checking. Somebody else asked me, and I'm like, I'll find out. I'll ask. I've got a whole panel of people.
I'm looking at ISBE conferring with one another.
Yeah, so just substitute.
Just subbing, yes, until somebody returns.
Substitute won't be sufficient, but there's a long-term substitute and short-term, so we need to comply with the long-term and short-term substitute. Okay, for a short-term substitute that for 2 months or 3 months, then that's fine. But if that substitute is going to be in that classroom for the entire years, okay, then the requirement is you need to have someone with the appropriate endorsements to substitute.
I would just add that, for best practice, if you have a retired EL teacher or retired bilingual teacher that might be willing to cover that sub, for example, if you have a bilingual kindergarten and 90% of the day is in Spanish and, the only sub you can find is an English-speaking teacher, that it sounds like legally you're covered, but as far as instruction, what's really best practice for kids, trying to find somebody that, could maybe apply for a sub or become a sub, that could still continue with the Spanish instruction or whatever that may be, I feel like there's a difference between what you have to do and what you probably should do.
Other questions that people may have?
So we have seen a significant increase of newcomers in our district at many different grade levels, representing many different languages. And so I was just curious what you've seen to be some of the best supports for providing accessibility to the learning and just acclimating to the school for newcomer students, outside of, being able to use Google Translate, in the ways that we can, just ways to either leverage their home language when they're not in a bilingual program, and just different supports that you're able to provide for newcomers.
We are, Harvard School District 50 does not have many other languages other than Spanish. We have limited languages in that regard. But for our newcomers, and particularly in our 4-5 building, we are utilizing a resource, Imagine Learning, for language and lit. And that has been very successful in regard to supporting those students. At our junior high and high school level, again, our primary language is Spanish, so we do have paraprofessionals for those additional supports. We've recently transitioned to those scholars not taking ELA, but rather in lieu of their ELA, they're taking an ELD class and transitioning out, rather than having a double block of one ELA and an ELD class. So that for us has been a positive transition. But limited just in the scope of Spanish only.
Right, and we have used Imagine Learning as well. There's also AV2 World Language libraries for the students that come in so many different languages that students can listen to them. So if you want to check that out. We also have our students in core classes, but then they also receive something called, in some grade levels, called language and literacy intervention, where they work throughout the day in a really small group with an ESL or bilingual certified teachers to really work on those foundational skills, because we want them to be exposed to grade level standards, but also kind of close that gap with those foundational literacy skills, so they're able to be in both. For our primary grades, we have an after-school program where they utilize hands-on English from Ballard and Thigh, where they're able to work on oracy, which we know that's the foundation to literacy. And then also, we have a process called the EL intake plan. So any newcomer that comes into our school districts transitions through an intake plan where they are able to not only be screened for language assessment, they're screened in their native language. We collect as much data as we can on the child and on their background. They go through a student and family interview, and we uncover so much from that, where students have, went to, second grade, but then had a third grade gap and came to us in fourth grade. So we uncover a lot of information about their historical education background. We also have our parent liaisons pair up with the families and connect more with them to see if there are any trauma or core stresses that we need to know about. After that, we're able to hold a student profile meeting with all the teachers that are involved in instructing the student, from the math ELA teachers to a PE teacher and art teacher, so everyone who's involved in that. And then we share this information with them, so they have information on their background, they have information. We write a narrative. It's similar to the WIDA narrative that sometimes we see with the access reports. And then from there, we get into our stage 3, where we monitor the student, make sure they're getting the accommodations they have. And so they are supported through that. So then we have tabs on how they're doing throughout the year. So that's just something we do to kind of onboard the students and support them. And from there, whatever the child needs, whether it's supplemental resources to additional check-ins or work with social workers, we're able to provide that for them.
And I was just going to echo what someone had mentioned about the paraprofessional. So I, on the other hand, have over 40 plus languages in my district. So we've been able to use paraprofessionals to come in and provide support. A lot of the elementary buildings in my district will, at the beginning of the year and mid-year do, building walkthroughs as far as like expectations and teaching all of that, which So I might have the paraprofessional go through and do all that again with them one-on-one with the students, just to kind of help them familiarize as well. But I would also recommend reaching out to your community resources. So where I'm from, we have an organization called the Refugee Center that is, kind of where a lot of our families kind of start that are coming in. So they have people that can help us and come in and help support the students and families with language needs as well.
So this is a little different slant maybe to answer to your question. So this past year, we've had a lot of new students, but they're not newcomers. So the students are coming with some proficiency in English, but the parents have no proficiency in English. So as a district, we have purchased, I'm not getting paid to make a plug or anything, but it's Worldwide Technologies, and we all have the apps on our lanyard, and a parent comes in and we can communicate with the parent that way. And so that's been a piece with our teachers. It's been a missing piece, is the communication with the parents. And we've used different things along the way. But so far, this has been a good thing for us. And I'm not for sure how much it's been used in the classrooms, but to communicate with the parents, it's been good.
I'll share one more resource that made me think of this as well. We do, as a district, also use talking points. I'm not sure if you've heard of that resource, but that's another great software that allows for you to communicate with all your families as well in a two-way fashion.
Tammy, can you repeat one more time? It was Worldwide.
Worldwide Technologies, or Worldwide Tech. And they're I want to say a fairly new. There aren't too many districts in Illinois that are utilizing them. And we're just like a couple months in.
Okay, we have our next question over here.
Back to that worldwide tech, though. What is it exactly? Is it a translator? Is it a program that parents can use?
There are different pieces to it. The piece that I'm referring to is like I have the QR code on my lanyard, and so I would go to the QR code, the parent would go to that, and then it opens up. It's called the box, and then you can talk and it will translate, or you can type and it will translate. And supposedly it is more than just Google Translate. There is AI involved, and the more you use it, supposedly, the better it gets at translating what you are saying. I haven't used it enough to know how accurate that is or not.
All right, thanks. The longer I sit here, the more questions I'm going to have. So I do have another question. This might be super quick. We use the WIDA screener, obviously, when students come in who we have no data on or who are newcomers. I have found, and I've gone through the training, and I give the screener and I score the screener, but I have found that it's lacking. And maybe I'm alone in that, but I feel like the score that it gives for the 4 domains, the writing sample is so short, and the speaking is so very little, that I think it's hard. And I was just wondering if districts tend to use a local screener in addition to that, or if that's even possible legally, I guess.
We only use the screener for that purpose. Now, classroom teacher is going to be doing his or her own, classroom assessments to see where they are.
Yeah, my issue is that the student comes to our district, it's high school, and they'll do the screener, and we have to create a schedule for them so fast so that they can get going, because a lot of times these students are coming in 2, 3, 5 weeks after school has started, and we want to get them going as quickly as possible, but we don't necessarily have that data yet to accurately give them classes and know which classes in our just regular ed, out there in the school in terms of electives and even PE, where are they going to be successful and not need extensive supports.
I think that would be a good like committee work for some of your teachers who are interested in developing entry assessments for students to see, you know, what makes most sense in terms of their placement. It could be, you know, a mixture of a couple of questions of grade level standards and then a couple in their native language just to get a feel for how much they know. But I could definitely see that being something where your teachers are working with you on. I know that that was a need a couple of years ago for the native language assessment. So our teachers got together and actually created, you know, a native language assessment in Arabic or in Polish in the 4 language domains. So that could be a thought.
Yeah, so any additional assessment that you do would be, you know, for helping to guide instruction or placement, but it wouldn't necessarily change the designation, whether or not they're designated as EL or not. Yeah.
Beside the English language proficiency assessment, the district does have the flexibility of, you know, using additional tests above and beyond that for instructional purposes. It can be math, science, social study, or any others, you know, assessment that you can use, but, you know, you cannot use that for placement. It's for instructional purposes. It can be native language if needed.
Other questions that you may have? Or perhaps a clarification to anything that was stated before? If you have a bilingual joke, we will hear it.
I remember last year, the conversation was dominated by screening and initial screening questions. I won't dredge up that topic, but I just remember that a lot.
Going once?
I just want to say, stick with it. This is a hard job if you're just getting started. It can be super frustrating, but it can be super rewarding. So find somebody that you can reach out to and vent to and ask questions because you're gonna need it.
Yeah, definitely use this opportunity to exchange business cards, to find somebody that you can reach out to. I think it was Dr. Ayala earlier that said that a lot of us are kind of alone in our positions in our district. So, you know, making sure that you're connecting with people because we don't have all the answers either. We rely on each other as well. So, you know, it's really important that you take advantage of your people.
Just to echo that, you also cannot do it alone. So build your team. If you don't have instructional leaders, tap into your building principals, into other district administrators. And if that's challenging too, tap into your teachers. You know, you need a team. You cannot do this alone.
Oh, I have a question. So I have a situation where I have a student who's a newcomer, second year in the country, and she's in 4th grade, and she just went through a whole year of reading development support in 3rd grade in like a tier 3 reading intervention in Spanish, and has data that has flatlined. So I'm talking about maybe reading 8 words per minute in Spanish. And she made no growth after she flatlined, obviously, and in her native language. What do we do about potentially having conversations about potentially opening up domains, or should we try intervening in English before having that?
Do you have any data, any English data? Or she's definitely a Spanish dominant student?
Yeah, she's definitely a Spanish dominant student. I mean, we have her access score. She's like a 1 point something.
And like the interventions that were utilized were like completed with fidelity, and you know what was going on. Okay.
Yeah, no, there's data. We have data to support it. We have, and it was, and when she was placed in those interventions, she also was given a normed screener to kind of screen her through and just see where where she belonged, and that's how she ended up in an intervention. Aside from just the screener, but also other data and other assessments tools that we used. I just don't want to keep waiting if she's like if there is something that we can do. I just don't want to keep waiting before all of a sudden she's going on to 5th grade or 6th grade, and then finally there's an IEP. You know.
So let me throw a question back at you. If she was not an English learner and you had a student who had flatlined and you have data showing that they're not making any progress, what would you do? You'd bring her up for special education. Same thing. You just make sure that the evaluations that you're going to use for special education are appropriate for her linguistic background.
And while Jay is walking over, a researcher such as Fred Genesee will say, if there's issues in one language, there will also be issues in another language. So it sounds like that's some of the indications you might be given.
Yeah, I have one more question. Before my question, I just wanted to say thank you. I know Josie and Shadi have been super helpful to me when I've called, and Shadi had texted you several times since I started this position over the summer. So thank you very much for all of your help and lots of
Great to
hours.
see you in person.
Yeah, good to see you. And I look forward to talking to Lydia on Monday at my Zoom session and meeting you then. So what's the breakdown for the special ed ESL students? How do you know if a SPED class trumps an EL class for our EL or bilingual learners, and for placing them in a high school?
One shouldn't trump the other.
For example, TBE Arabic biology versus co-taught biology special ed.
So could you have the co-teacher co-teach in the TBE Arabic biology?
Say that one more time.
So could you have the person that was co-teaching in the co-taught class co-teach in the TBE Arabic biology class?
But then they wouldn't be in that other section to service the SPED students. We use a co-teaching model for our TBE and for our special ed courses.
Does your district offer a resource in which maybe the special ed teacher could secondarily support the student in that environment?
Potentially, but I mean that gets into scheduling, which is sometimes above my pay grade and sometimes rushed with lots of other students to schedule at the same time.
Yeah.
So we're going to provide an answer to that.
Okay, so it should be written into the IEP document that the biology, for example, will be taken in special ed, and you don't have much flexibility, because if you don't provide that, then you have to amend that IEP document. However, if the student is outside of special ed, if you think that option B is better for the student and the IEP allows it, because you always have to remember that, and the student is not making progress, then I recommend that the IEP team, at least some members, reconvene and look at the document again and find a better option for the student.
At the very basic, English learner services is a civil right of the child. Special education services are a civil right of the child. It's not one over the other, and programming is supposed to be designed to fit the needs of the children and not force the children into the programs you have, which is right. Because that's when you ended up in this conundrum of, well, which trumps? I've got these two programs, and these are the only two programs. Sometimes you need to look at and really bring in what is actually best for the kids that I have. And that's challenging. It is really hard. But if you have your dedicated team, your IEP staff, your bilingual staff, the parents, all together talking through all the options, you can usually find something that works.
And that all-together piece that Joanne mentioned is the critical piece. Like, it can't be the two departments working in isolation. They really have to work together and talk about those goals and what's best for the child from both departments and programs.
Other questions, comments, clarifications? Are we all still awake? Do we need that joke? Do we have a request for a joke? Okay. What do you call a Mexican pacemaker? Any guesses? What do you call a Mexican pacemaker? Like those things that you have in those hearts? A marca pesos. Marca pesos. Good. For those of you that are unaware, peso is the currency in Mexico. Marca pasos is the word for a pacemaker in Spanish.
Thank you, Jay.
I'll be here all night. Well, now I know everyone's awake, so that's good. Going once for questions.
Well, I think we've exhausted the questions here, and I do want a shout out to people who have been really persistent. Especially we have some people who have really taken us on and asking some very thoughtful questions. So I really want to thank our panelists for this afternoon: Guadalupe Ricconi, Tammy Peterson, Amber Bogren, and Shadia Slum, and of course the choir that is the ISBE multilingual department that will always chime in to offer opinions, led by Joanne Clyde. So, and thank you, Jonathan, for running around with the microphone. So, I think, so unless somebody else has some burning question, you can always talk to us afterwards. Have a great Friday afternoon and a terrific weekend, and thanks so much for coming.